Let's start understanding about Spring Web Module and Spring Boot also. So what is a web module? Why we are using web module? What is the purpose of web module? And why we are calling it as MVC module? Um, the same thing being called as MVC module. We will understand, and we will try to make something. Sorry. Yeah. So we will try to understand point by point everything. Don't worry. Okay, so first of all, what is a web here? It is why we are calling it as a web module. That is the point. Why Spring Boot given this, or why we are calling it as a web module. So generally Spring Boot will represent this as always a web module. So why they calling as web module here it is. The reason is, so generally we have two types of software applications, right? Mostly when you are working with Java language, you used to create one thing like standalone applications, and second one is web applications. You can implement standalone applications as well as web applications. So what is the point of standalone here? We know that it's just like the application, what you maybe kind of games or this kind of paint application, notepad, this kind of DB where this Eclipse, these are all what standalone applications. So that means you are going to install, you will have some installer. So that means that is also a software application, but it's a different kind of application. You will have an installer and you will install and then you will use it. So for a couple of the standalone application point of view, sometimes you may need internet or may not require internet also. So some of the things you don't need any internet. For example, if you take an Eclipse, not required any internet. If you take a Zoom application to join meeting, you need a Zoom software. That means it is internally requires internet to join the meeting. So whatever it is, that's called as standalone. You know the story. See, that's what you know already. Servlets API. I'm assuming like I'm not assuming everyone knows about Servlets API in this case. So what is a Servlets API? Just you know that, right? That's more enough. Basic knowledge is more enough. So based on that, I'll continue this web application. Okay. So the point of web application here it is internet. So it's web is representing internet. So that means it's going to we are going to build an application with respect to web functionalities. Nothing but it requires internet point of view. Nothing but you will always have a structure client server architecture. So that means when you are implementing a web application, you always have a yeah. Please bear with my cough. I can't do anything. Okay. So whenever we are implementing web application, we used to follow a architecture called as client server architecture. Client as well as server architecture. So this is called as client server architecture. So with respect to client server architecture point of view, this is all called as, I mean, with respect to a web application point of view, we are going to call it as. So what is the meaning of why we are using web means client. Client is nothing but from where, for example, if I taken, let me open some website or whatever it is. Yeah. So for example, I'm opening Gmail. Now in this case, the moment I Google, so I'm browser, I opened the browser called as Chrome browser, and from that Chrome browser, I entered Gmail. Okay, and then I got Gmail is the search engine, whatever it is. Now, in this case, this browser is a client. In this case, what is this browser? I'm calling it as a client. So from this browser client, I'm sending some okay search engine level. So you need google.com. So that means now the moment I entered google.com from my client called as Chrome browser, what happens immediately? It is going to load the Google website. So to access this website, you are using a client called as Chrome software. Now tomorrow, if I want to access same thing from the Internet Explorer, yes, I can do that. So Internet Explorer. or maybe nowadays it is renamed it as Edge, right? Yeah, so Microsoft Edge. So when you want to use another browser, so now in this case, Edge is a client. So that means I'm accessing same Google website again from the Edge browser. So I'm accessing Instagram. So Instagram.com. So in this case, the moment I entered Instagram.com, so whatever the content I can see here, whatever the content I can see here, so the same thing, if I'm accessing again from the Chrome browser, I can do that. So what you can do, you can access again from the Chrome browser also. So that means in this case, browsers are acting as clients. Browsers are acting as clients in general. Okay, so what you can call it as, guys, browsers. Browsers are acting as clients. Browsers are acting as a clients. Okay. Now from this browser, what you are doing from this browser, maybe whether it is a Chrome or whatever it is, for example, assume Chrome. Okay. So you're entering something like www.google.com. So the moment you enter this URL, what your browser history, I mean your client is doing, it is taking that URL via internet. Okay, and you to access this, definitely you need an internet. So that's why it is called as web application. So the request is going to the, so you know what is a request, what is a response. So I'm not going again, what is a request and all. So the request is reaching to the server. That means maybe it is a cloud environment or whatever it is. Server is nothing but a kind of computer only, but you know that it is having supercomputer, and nothing but it is having a lot of huge configuration, huge RAM. So like that, they will have a lot of other things. So the request reaching to the server, where based on that URL internally some configuration will happen, domain namespace or something like that. And once based on the domain namespace, it knows that where it has to reach. So it will reach to the Google server. It reaches to the Google server where your Google application is deployed. Google application is deployed. Where your Google application is deployed. And that once the request is reached to the Google application, so what it will do from that server, once the Google application point of view, it will send response back to you. So it is going to send you response back. So that response again you are seeing in the front end point of view. You will see like this point of view. You will see this. Whatever the response they are saying, sending, you will see that. Like something Google and search box, all these things, you will see here it is. So you will see search box or whatever it is. You will see like Google, all these details. So now my point here it is, right? So this is what, similarly Instagram, Dilip IT, whatever websites you are accessing, simply generally we used to call it as websites. So now the moment you entered something like dilipit.com or something, what will happen? The request reaching to the application called as Dilip IT, where it is deployed. So wherever I deployed this application, there it is reaching. There it is reaching. So that means the request is going to the application. The request is reaching to the server where that application is deployed. And okay, like that. And once the request reaches to that server and to the application, whatever you implemented, and that response is coming back and displaying in the front end format like this. So in this case, client is nothing but browsers, guys. Clients are calling as browsers, we are calling as clients. And whatever the URL you are sending for the first time and whatever the response you are receiving back and whatever you are seeing here, these colors, these logos, these images, okay, these icons, whatever comes under in this case, this is all what implemented under the front end point of view. So that means from the client perspective, whatever you are seeing, that all comes under the front end. With eyes, whatever we can see, it's all comes under the front end point of view. So by using front-end technologies, people will implement like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and TypeScript, Angular, React, Vue.js, whatever it is, it's all. etc., etc., etc. It's all front end technologies. It's all front end technologies. As a full stack application point of view, I'm talking. Yeah, it's all about etc., etc. It's all front end technologies. So that means from the client, whenever you access any website, whether it is a Gmail, whether it is a Dilip IT, whether it is a Instagram, whatever it is. See, the moment you entered Instagram.com, it displaying this color, and it is asking some username and password. The moment you get entered username and password, okay, and the enter password, and if you are clicking on login, what will happen? This username and password via request submitted to the server where your Instagram application is deployed. So wherever your application is installed in the deploy, so maybe that server is under the premises of Meta or maybe Facebook company or whatever it is. So it will reach request to that server where Instagram application is deployed, and then that request is a valid request. Then it will give response back to the user, like it will validate. So then what will happen? The data coming to the server application of Instagram level wherever it is deployed, and then it will start validating the username and password with respect to what? DB, database. So it will validate with the database this user is already registered or not with that user ID and password combination. If registered, then it will say like user is a valid user and it will display all your home page and everything. If not, then it will say like invalid user ID. So this is all functionalities happens via internet. And this is all, these are all applications we are calling as a web applications. So these are all applications we are calling as a web applications. So that means in reality, when we join into any organization, 90% of time we are going to work on the web applications only. We are going to work always mostly on the web application. So with respect to backend point of view, we know that the technologies what we are using programming languages as a Java developer, Java and maybe JEE, like advanced Java point of view, servlets, JDBC, JSP, and then followed by associated frameworks like Spring, Spring Boot, all these things. Okay, so internally JPA, Hibernate, whatever it is. So these are all related to backend technologies. So now by using these technologies and front end and back end point of view, we will create a web application point of view. So in this case, as a backend developer, as a Java developer, as a Spring developer or Spring Boot developer, our focus is always in this area. So what is the roles or what is the focus as a Java developer in this case is our focus is always about this one. What? It's all about we have to write a logic something like handling the requests, and based on the request whatever handling request means the request what comes from the front end point of view, you will handle the request and you will write some logic like that handling the request, and based on the request point of view you will do some okay DB operations or whatever it is, that logic you will write, and based on that you will generate some response, you will generate some response and you will send it back to whom? To the front end. To the front end. You are generating and sending it back to the front end. So from where the request came from the client. So from the browser, whatever the browser, the request is sent to there, you are sending response back. So that means as a developer, we are going to focus in this area and we are going to implement all these solutions as part of our web applications. So same thing, probably we did, not probably, we did in the servlets also. So that means without servlets, you can't create a web application. So with servlets only we can create always web apps or web application. So in Java language perspective, not leave about Spring Boot, Spring. With respect to Java perspective, without servlet API, you can't create the web application. With only pure core Java, or JDBC, you can't create any web application. Only standalone you can create it. But with the help of servlets, you can create the web application. Nothing but where you are bringing up the client server architecture and you are going to make sure all the application being implemented and that application is being deployed on a server. So in this case, when you are creating servlet applications, nothing but our backend application with respect to front end point of view and back end point of view. So what you used to do in this case, you know that how to write servlet applications, HTTP servlet, form, submitting the form, request.get parameters. So this is all we did as part of our servlets, right? So that means in this case, you will create a backend application. Okay, fine, that's okay. We are creating a backend application. Okay, we are creating a backend application by using servlets. Right? So what are the challenges you did? I mean, what are the steps you carried as part of the to create a servlet application? Is first step is create a project under web application format. So you can't create like a regular Java project, right? You can't create like a regular Java project. You have to create it as a web application format. So where you have something like web-inf folder, web.xml file, something like that. So some different format. That means web application format. After that, what you will do? Assume now your project setup is good. You will start creating servlets based on the request point of view. Based on the requirement point of view, you will start writing the servlets. So while you are implementing the servlets, what you will do? So for example, user sign up servlet. You want to implement user sign up. From the front end, the data user sign up is coming. For example, in this case, I don't have any account sign up. So that means now what customer is doing? Entering mobile number, password, full name, username. I'm giving my mobile number and I'm giving my password. Okay. And I'm giving, okay, something, whatever it is. They are doing validations, leave it. Okay, now I entered my name and then I entered my username also and then my entered username or whatever it is. So in this case, the moment I clicked on the sign up, what will happen? This entire information, my mobile number, password, full name, username is going to be submitted as a request to the backend application. So nothing but to deal with that with respect to servlet point of view, you will write a servlet. So what is the challenge while you are writing the servlet? User sign up servlet or something like that, you return a Java class. And the moment you return user sign up servlet, what is the challenge here? It is you have to make sure always created from the HTTP servlets. Or else you have to implement servlet interface. If you want to make a class as a a Java class, you have to make sure that class is directly or indirectly, okay, implemented from the servlet interface. So that means you have to take either servlet, either generic servlet, either HTTP servlet, right? So this is the must and should step you have to carry out. Point number one. This is the must and should you have to do that. Okay, cool. And after that, what you will do? The logic, whatever you are going to write based on the HTTP methods. So you know what is the HTTP methods? I think. Okay, but anyway, I'll at least basic things. I'll explain you at what time you have to choose get, post, put to delete, all these things we will see later. Especially these four we will discuss more. Okay, so based on the HTTP method point of view, you know that whether you want to execute a service method and or else do post, do get, some kind of predefined methods available, and based on that what you will do, you will implement it, the functionality taking the data, like writing http servlet request, and from that you will get the data like request.get parameters of, like that you will have some form names front end point of view, and by giving that form field name you will get the data, so like whatever the mobile number and all, and then you will write some logic like dealing with database. So DB logic you will write, maybe it is a JDBC or JPA or Hibernate. Then finally you will store the data into DB. and then you will pass an information back to the, once it is successfully stored on the DB, what you will do, you will do validation also, that username is already existed or not. Maybe someone is already using that username, right? So who knows? So that is already used by someone else. So that means that is all, and you will do, and then finally you will say everything is good. Then you will give response back like user account is created successfully. User account is created successfully. So this is all you are doing with respect to one small requirement. Now I am asking you to okay, implement with respect to login. So sign up, okay. I'm asking you to do again with respect to login. The moment login point of view, what will happen? This is a different page again. So he will enter his username and password. Now in this case, what you will do? You have to write again one more servlet. You have to write again one more servlet. You have to write one more new servlet. Something like user sign in servlet or whatever it is. User sign in servlet. And what is the challenge here? It is for a register, sorry, for a sign up, login, sign in operations point of view itself, you return two servlets. Now, like that, tomorrow if you have n number of requests, so n number of requirements, and where you are going to send different scenarios, different request point of view. Like tomorrow you will add your personal details, and then you will click on submit. You will remodify. I mean, you will modify your password. You will update your password. You will upload your photos. You will upload your reel. So like that, you will do lot of other activities. So to implement all these requirements, when you are assume you are creating a Instagram application, to implement all these requirements, you need to write hundreds of servlet classes. Hundreds of servlet classes. So that means, okay, we can write the servlet classes, but the problem here it is what's happening in the servlet's point of view. As a point, if you observe here, you are writing, okay, the boilerplate code. Generally, people will call it as, in a software terminology, boilerplate code. Okay, code. So that means the code what you are writing again and again is called as boilerplate. Same code, duplication code. Simply I can call it as duplicate code. So that means if you observe here, if I writing 100 servlets, every time I have to write down like this. Extend servlets, extend servlets, extend servlets, extend, and you don't have a choice, you don't have an option to rename your own method names. You can't do that. You have to take only that predefined set of methods only, either do get, do post, service methods. You can't use your own method names, and you have to write always your own, I mean, you have to write always this extension like you are making as a servlet class, so that you are keep on writing lot of boilerplate code. To write anything, to implement something, you are writing a lot of boilerplate code. So that means same code duplication is happening in our application again and again. As a mandatory point of view, you have to write all this. Now if you written 100 servlets, definitely in 100 servlets level you have to write, that means every servlet is a one .java file, right? So that means if 100 servlets means 100 .java files you are going to create, and you can't handle 2 3 URL patterns, something like sign in, sign up, okay, something like upload, something like update, reset password, like that. If you have any URL patterns, for a different URL pattern point of view, you are going to write different servlets. You can't handle, okay, different functionalities with respect to different URL patterns in a single servlet. You can't implement that. For this one servlet, for this one servlet, for this one servlet, for this one servlet, like that, for every requirement point of view, you are writing hundreds of servlets classes. That is the biggest challenge in the servlets. So now this is the biggest challenge. So a lot of challenges in the servlets point of view. You are writing boilerplate code, you are writing number of Java files, For everything for every new servlet, you are writing a new Java file. For every URL pattern, you are writing a new servlet like that. So hundreds of servlet classes for hundreds of URL patterns, and then every time you are writing this logic in every servlet class. These are all challenges, or these are all things you have to carry as part of the servlet API. Now, what in this case Spring framework done? So first Spring, you know that Spring Boot is all about Spring only, right? So now in this case, what Spring framework people thought, and you know that again one more thing. Okay, maybe you have done all these things, and after out of all these, you have to do one more step. What it is? You need a server. So once you are done that, to execute logic of web application or backend application point of view, so you need always a web server, web or application server. You need always a web or application server. Similar, nothing but what? A Tomcat. An example: Tomcat, WebLogic, WebSphere, JBoss, WebLogic, WebSphere, JBoss, etc., etc., etc. Okay, with nowadays it's not that much important. At one point of time, very famous. Nowadays, serverless applications are coming. Okay, so these are all web application server you. So for example, you choose in the Tomcat. So that means what you are going to do in this case? You will again download a server called as Tomcat server, and then you will start that Tomcat server, and on top of that Tomcat server, you will deploy your application. So application is deployed, and from there, once your application is deployed, and your application is deployed, and then you will start sending requests and responses, and you will receive responses point of view. So this is the flow, you know that in the servlets point of view. So you need a Tomcat server, and you will deploy it, whatever the application you did, and then finally you will start sending requests and responses with respect to front end point of view. So that's all the story, we know that, right? So in this case, the challenge to the developer point of view, see, as a customer, as a user, what is the technologies they are using in the backend? I don't know. Maybe these guys are using React or Angular, or in the backend they are using Python, Java. I can't say that sometimes. It doesn't matter also as a user point of view. But while you are creating Instagram application itself, the story is all about. So you are going to take almost 2 to 3 years of time in this approach to implement that software application. 2 3 years of application. If you are involving 100 developers, also maybe assume it is taking 2 years of time to build entire application point of view, for example, because you need to take lot of challenges, huge code, huge Java files with respect to only servlets, and again you will have a lot of JDBC logic, and you need to write a lot of Pojo classes like that. You have to do a lot of manual things in the servlets point of view. Now in this case, what Spring Framework thought? Now Spring Framework absorbed all these challenges, what developers are carrying as part of Servlet API point of view. They are absorbed all these things. Okay. So now what Spring Framework is doing in this case is, Spring Framework absorbed all these challenges. What are the challenges that are happening with respect to development? And they came up with a concept called as, I said, right? So Spring Framework is a set of modules. So to do web functionalities, web module. To do database functionalities, JDBC and JPA modules. To do security functionalities, security module. To do some other functionalities, some other modules. So like that. Now in this case also, Spring Framework people, they identified all these challenges, and they came up with some ready. Okay, they are simplified this entire process. The way you are creating servlets, the way you are writing the boilerplate code, they observed everything, and they came up with some simplified solutions. Some simplified solutions. See, ultimately, whatever you are achieving, sending request, receiving response, executing logic, whatever the things we are expecting here, same you are going to do with Spring Framework. Okay, but in a simplified development point of view. So they implemented a lot of solutions to overcome all these challenges, and they released into market as a web module. They released it into market as a web module. They released it into as a web module into the market. So that means now if you are using the Spring framework, what is the okay benefits you are going to get over this servlet API? Let's try to understand same requirement point of view. Now I said number of requirements are 100. Then you are writing 100 servlet classes. The moment you are writing 100 servlet classes means you are writing 100 Java files. 100 Java files. For example, a small example point of view I'm taking. That is one drawback. And second thing, in every servlet, you are going to write this boilerplate code, and even though you are not required, everywhere you are need to mention. And you don't have a choice of writing your own method names. Now, what Spring Framework is saying is to achieve same kind of functionalities as a backend application point of view, okay, to achieve whatever with respect to your application, what Spring Framework is trying to say here it is, if you follow the Spring Framework rules and regulations, definitely they will give some rules and regulations. So if you follow these rules and regulations or as part of the Spring Framework web module, so what they are trying to say here it is to the development or developer point of view, you are not going to write boilerplate code. So that means somehow you are not going to write anything, okay, like extends HTTP servlet like that. You are not writing anything with respect to Spring Framework. Ultimately, functionality wise same only. Whether you are writing this way, functionality is same. But as a developer perspective, you are not going to write this boilerplate code again and again in this Spring Framework point of view. Point number one. Point number two. I said for every URL pattern point of view, you are creating a individual servlet class. So for example, 100 URL patterns you got based on your requirement point of view, 100 URL patterns you got. So something like slash reset password, slash upload, slash delete, okay, slash whatever it is, slash upload reel, slash upload photo, slash comment, slash something like that. You have a lot of 100 URL patterns point of view. Now in this case, you are implementing hundreds of servlet class. Deal with that. So now in this case, what Spring Framework is saying is, you no need to write in individual Java class, an individual Java file. For example, in this case, 100 URL patterns means on source code point of view, finally you are writing 100 Java files. 100 Java files to deal with only URL patterns point of view. So that means if you are writing 100 Java files related to only servlets, then what about the service layer? What about the business logic? What about the service layer? Nothing but business logic, nothing but where you are doing the database logic. For that also you have to write a lot of Java classes. So that means your source code is becoming huge to deal with every URL pattern and servlet. Now in this case, what these people are saying is, you no need to write a single, no need to write a single Java file for single URL pattern functionality implementation point of view. So that means what they are trying to say is in a single Java file, in a single Java file itself, we can we can implement multiple okay URL patterns functionality implementation. So that means in this case, what Spring Framework is saying is we can implement multiple URL functionality implementations. So that means tomorrow, if you are doing user sign in, sign up, okay, user password, reset password, you did 3 URL patterns related to user operations point of view, right? So that means now what you can do, you will write only one single Java file. So how to write, that is what you are training. So you will write only single Java file, something like whatever it is, users whatever it is, something like users.java or whatever it is, single Java file point of view, only one Java file you will write. And you can add all the functionalities like slash, sign in point of view, sign up point of view, whatever the logic you're receiving request and taking data, sending back to the DB. So sign in, sign up, password, reset password, etc., etc., etc. You can start adding multiple URL pattern functionalities. So it's all the story I'm explaining with respect to development point of view, developer point of view. So you can add multiple URL pattern functionalities in a single Java file itself. So that means now if with respect to servlet point of view, if you written 100 Java files, in this case, how many Java files you can write here it is, it's up to your choice. If you want to write all 100 URL patterns in single Java file, yes, you can keep it up. If you feel like functionality wise, okay, user related one Java file, Instagram post point of view, one Java file, Reels point of view, if you have 10 to 15 URL patterns, one Java file, like that you can segregate the things based on your comfort. But the point here it is, you may achieve from within one Java file also. If you are added all 100 to one Java file, yes, you can do that. But you felt like you should not add more at a time to one single Java file. If you are feeling like unnecessarily or adding everything in one place, you can create one more Java file and add couple of things to that. So that means you are drastically reducing the number of Java files, the number of Java files. So that means the maintenance of source code will become very easy in this case. First of all is you are not writing this logic again and again. Second thing is you are not at all creating every time a single Java file for every small okay request handling functionality point of view. So that is the biggest advantage. So you are avoiding this duplication code. You are writing very less amount of Java files, and as well as in this case, what Spring Framework is saying is the method names also generally here it is restricted. You have to use only those method names. But here, what Spring Framework is saying is the method names when you are writing anything, you can write your own method names. You can write your own method names. So not only this guys, so many other benefits are there. Not only this, I'm not talking about only one. Like so many you have, so many benefits like you have. But how these are all things came means the Spring Framework implemented a lot of solutions by using internally Servlet API only. So that means what these guys are done here in this case is, now in this case what Spring team done here it is, they observed, they taken, now in this case Spring Framework with respect to web module point of view, so internally they taken Servlet API, okay, and they automated a lot of solutions they implemented. Okay, internally they taken Servlet API only by default, and they implement a lot of logic to simplify the process of all these okay things. They implement a lot. So that means my point here it is internally Spring Framework web module is using again Servlet API only. But these guys are automated a lot of solutions. These guys are automated a lot of solutions. That's all. That is the advantage. As a developer, we are getting benefited from this Spring Framework. Like now in this case, you can implement this project within 1 year. I can say like yes, within 1 year, you can implement this project. So it is 2 to 3 years. Why? For everything you have to write, for everything you have to do manual things, so many Java files, so many boilerplate code, even though you have to write every time. So that means it requires longer time to deal with code, to deal with testing, to deal with so many things. Lot of manual things you are doing. Lot of automation is happened and lot of easy. They made easy development and you can develop within 1 year point of view. So in this case, that is how frameworks are going to helpful for us. That you saw already in the JDBC, Java JDBC versus, I think you know that the benefit of frameworks already. So if you comparing Java JDBC versus Spring JDBC, how much relaxation you got. So when you are doing the Java JDBC, you did every time connection manager, driver manager, SQL exception, connection dot close, okay, result set dot while loop. You did lot of headache. But when you taken same thing in the Spring JDBC point of view, you are not done anything. You just taken always auto void of JDBC template. So only one time you will give one someplace DB credentials, and see everywhere you will do JDBC template auto void, and you will do the DB operations. And you will do the DB operation. And you will write a row mapper classes, and at the same time you did some row mapper classes. You will implement some row mapper class, and if you given that row mapper class to the JDBC template, it will give you a list of objects also. So that means from 100 lines to 15-20 lines you reached when you are using Spring JDBC. Similarly, when you are coming to the JPA, even over the Spring JDBC, if you are comparing with JPA point of view, even this headache is also a lot of things gone. Like for example, if you want to do insert operation, you did only one single save method. You are just making a single save method call. That's all. And you are passing a simple Java object, that employee object or user object, whatever it is. A simple Java object you are passing to a method called as save. That means you made solution to one line. So here it took, assume 50 lines, it took, and here it took, okay, 52, assume I can say like 10 lines or maybe less than that, but here it took to 1 to 2 lines. So see how much abstraction happened with respect to Spring JPA point of view. So you understood the taste of framework, or you know the reality of framework, how it is okay, improving the development, rapid development. So that's why I said 1 year. So that is the advantage of framework. So you are doing things very quickly and with very less amount of code. With very less amount of code, and you are doing things very quickly because these are all solutions implemented internally, customized by Spring Framework, and we are just using those into our projects, and based on the requirements we are using those methods, those interfaces, those classes, and we are making all these things. Similarly, in this case also Spring Framework came up with a concept called as web module to deal with only web functionalities. Whatever servlets point of view we did to overcome the challenges, we are going to use Spring Web Module to create always Spring Web applications. Now in this case, again, so finally you are going to understand Spring Web Module is going to do some lot, okay, is going to provide lot of benefits to implement the web applications. Okay, fine. To implement the web applications. So the moment I said web application, again, what should come in our mind? Server should coming into the picture. So like that, when you are implementing an application with servlets, then also you take in Tomcat server help. Yes, in servlets point of view also, sorry, Spring also, when you created a Spring web application, okay, maybe you got knowledge and you created the Spring web application. In this case also, you need to make sure your Spring web application is deployed on the one of the web server. One of the web server. It's not only Tomcat, guys. We have WebLogic, WebSphere, like that. So many things in our market. JBoss, like that. Okay, but generally Tomcat we used to take. It's a lightweight and very simple to understand. Like that, one of the web application server we will choose, and there we will deploy our Spring web application project. So what we will do there, we will deploy our Spring web application. So ultimately in this case also, to test your application, I mean, to make sure your application is up and running, you need a Tomcat server help. I mean, one web server help in this case also. Similar to servlets only. Similar to servlets only. You need in this case also server. Okay. So in this case, there is no difference. You need definitely a server. So you need to download Tomcat server. You have to install Tomcat server and you have to start the Tomcat server. And then you will deploy the Tomcat server and then only you can execute the logic. Then only you can execute the logic. So same steps again here also common. But with respect to development point of view, you did lot of things very quickly and finally you are able to execute your application. So this is what you are going to do in the Spring Web application point of view. Now again, as part of Spring Boot, you know that Spring Boot got popular. I said already, what is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot in the day one itself? So Spring Boot got a popular what? Because of microservices. Now, when it comes to the microservices architecture, I said one application, one big application, you are going to make into small applications, n number of applications. You are going to break into small application point of view. So one application is categorized into n number of applications, small pieces. For example, assume 15, 30 microservices you made as part of Instagram. 30 microservices. That means 30 small applications. And overall, it is a single application, but with respect to microservices architecture, you made it as the 30 small apps. And overall, it is Instagram, but 30 is microservices point of view. So in this case, nothing but 30 web applications. For example, I'm saying here. So that means that how many web applications? You will make connectivity between one microservice to another microservice, overall Instagram. And but internally, what you did is user service, okay, something like reels, post management, reels management, okay, something like whatever it is, live management, so on, so other managements, complaints, customer care, something like revenue, ads, post, meta, Facebook integration. So like that, you are making security point of view. You made a lot of microservices. Service number one, two, three, like that. You made 30 small applications. Overall, is a Instagram. Now, even your Instagram application is also whatever what we are using right now is a microservices application. Netflix is a microservices application. The Netflix, what we are doing every day on Netflix, is also a microservice application. Yes, Netflix is definitely a microservice application. But as a as a user point of view, we will feel like only single application. But in the back end, they are running a lot of microservices. So that means now to make connectivity between one service to another service point of view, we know that we will use some techniques, REST APIs integration or whatever it is. That is what we will cover as part of that. But my point here it is total 30 small apps and everything is a web application. So nothing but indirectly what you did 30 web applications. Whether it is a small or big, it doesn't matter. Finally, it's a web application. 30 web applications. So that means what you have to do to deploy these 30 web applications, what you have to, you have a lot of challenges. You have a lot of challenges. That means with respect to deployment point of view, with respect to server management, with respect to deployment point of view, with respect to server management, so that means nothing but our Tomcat server, WebLogic server, all this point of view. With respect to server management, you are having a lot of challenges. So in earlier, as a single monolithic application point of view, you need one server and you deployed everything on Tomcat server. But now in the same Tomcat server, you have to make sure, for example, Tomcat I'm taking, not so like that. Now always not Tomcat, for example. Now what you have to do, you have to make sure this 30 web applications got deployed here. 30 web applications got deployed here it is. The biggest challenge in this case is you have a lot of challenges, not only here. So in a single Tomcat server, you can give only one port number. Like for example, 8080, or maybe you can. So in a single Tomcat server, you can give only one port number and you are deployed 30 web applications. And sometimes I want an individual web application should run on individual Tomcat server. Sorry, individual port number. I don't want common port number for all web applications. So some of the web applications, some of the microservices point of view, I want a different port number. I want something like 8081 for some other microservice, some other point of view 8082 like that. Then what you have to do? In a single Tomcat, you can't distribute the multiple port numbers. Then you have to download again or bring up one more instance by configuring 8081 port, 8082, 8083 like that. What you are doing, you are increasing the number of servers. You are increasing the number of servers. And then you are making that application got deployed in this case. This is a challenge here it is. So that is how the challenges came with respect to microservices architecture. And because of microservices, only Spring Boot came into the picture mostly. Okay. So that's why what Spring Boot thought in this case is, see, until Spring, this is again common. Okay, now what Spring Boot is also thought with respect to microservices architecture and whatever the challenges available again here, what Spring Boot thought in this case is, Whatever the things you can do with respect to coding point of view, that is okay. That is as it is. You know that, right? Spring Boot is nothing but Spring plus some extra features. So we already understood Spring Boot equal to Spring plus some additional features. That is what Spring Boot. So with respect to logic wise, what you can do in this Spring framework, same thing they are keeping as it is. They came up with, in this case, integrated Tomcat server. What? In this case, the moment, that means now if you take in the Spring Boot framework, so yeah, so in this case, if I'm taking Spring Boot framework and if I created web application with respect to Spring Boot point of view, okay, yes, whatever the coding strategies we discussed, whatever the advantages I discussed with respect to coding point of view, those are all things come. But with respect to Spring point of view, you need always a Tomcat server externally deployed, installed, and started, and then you can test it. But in this case, what Spring Framework thought here it is, you know that to execute a web application, you need always a web server. Without web server, you can't execute your application. Without server, there is no point of executing your functionalities. Server is 100% mandatory. But what in this case Spring Boot thought here it is, these guys came like when you created a web application with respect to Spring framework, so Spring Boot point of view web application, Spring Boot web application, they given integrated Tomcat server. They came up with integrated Tomcat server. So that means what is the point here it is, the moment you created Spring Boot web application, you will, with respect to coding point of view, whatever the things I explained you right now, like you are going to write all URL pattern things in one Java file itself, more than one URL pattern in a single Java file, you don't need to write that boilerplate code, and you do have a lot of other advantages, like I said, right? So those are all Spring framework web module functionalities as it is, okay. But along with that, you will get integrated Tomcat server. Integrated Tomcat server. Integrated. So that means integrated web server or Tomcat server, whatever it is. By default, they taken Tomcat. That's why I'm using. So what is the point here? It is in our terminology. The moment you created Spring Boot web application project, the moment you created Spring Boot web application project, internally it is integrated with web server. So that means in this case, you don't need we don't need we don't need by default a server to deploy and test and execute. Okay, so that means what is my point here? It is, so what it is trying to say I'm in this case is, we don't need a by default a server to deploy and execute. So in this case, what I said in Spring framework point of view, in your computer, for example, wherever it is, you need always a Tomcat server. I mean, one of the server, and then you can deploy it. To test it also, while development also, you have to do all these steps. But in this case, it's not only microservices because of cloud environment also. Now you know that cloud is also one of the cloud infrastructure. Cloud infrastructure point of view also, this serverless concept came more and more. So now it's that sort. So what's happened in this case is Spring Boot, the moment you created the project, internally they came up with Tomcat integrated web server. So that means externally, externally means as a developer again in my computer, externally in my computer, I don't want, no need of any server, no need of any server. But without server, how can you execute your web functionalities, web application functionalities? You know that, right? When you implemented servlets, to receive hello response, also you have to send a request, and that request will reach to Tomcat server. So that means first of all, you have to deploy your servlet application on the Tomcat server. Tomcat server. Then you can send a request from the front end, then it will give you response back. But in this case, I'm saying like no need of any server. That means we don't need any deep server, okay, installed in our computer. Then how can you test your Spring Boot web application? Yes, internally it came up with integrated web server. So that means now what will happen in this case? Now if I created again one more Spring Boot web application, then it's having its own server. It's having its own server. Now I created one more Spring Boot web application. Now it is having its own server. Now it is having its own server. Now I am creating one more Spring Boot web application. Now it is having its own server. So that means every Spring Boot web application by default coming up with integrated web server. So the moment, for example, now I said, right, 30 microservices. Yes. Now assume you created 30 Spring Boot web applications, 30 Spring Boot web apps. Now you don't have any challenges in this case because every web application is having its own web server, its own private web server. Now I said what? I want one web service on 8081 port. I want one more on the 80822, like that I said. If it is previous approach, you have to, okay, make sure multiple servers getting up started with individual ports to deploy that specific applications. But here in the project, internally project itself, you are having the integrated Tomcat server, private server point of view, I can call it as. So I got cold and cough. Okay. See, so you have a lot of Spring Boot web application and everything is having its own private server. Now, for example, I said, I want this in the port number 88. Yes, you can do that. We will see that going further. So what you will do? You will do a small property updated as 8888 or whatever port number you want. You will do it. Similarly, if you want this one as in the different port number, yes, you can do that. So you want in a different port number like 8081, yes, you can do that. And here also you will update this one. So that means now in your computer, you are not having any external Tomcat servers or any servers you are not installed. The project itself, the Spring Boot web application itself having its own server internally. It's having its own server internally. So integrated web server. Yes, this is the biggest advantage of Spring Boot web application when comparing with Spring. When comparing with Spring. Okay, and not only this, there are few other small differences are available in the Spring and Spring Boot point of view that I mentioned in the material also very well. One fine day after taking couple of examples, I'll just compare. I will not compare right away. Once you are getting some confidence on the Spring Boot point of view, then I'll show you Spring. See, this is what happening in the Spring. If you're comparing with Spring Boot like that, one fine day I'll just show you for 5-10 minutes. Then you'll realize what is the real difference between Spring and Spring Boot with respect to web module point of view. So now in this case, it came up with a lot of integrated web servers. Now understand the microservices point of view. Yes. So now what is the point in this case is if you are implemented microservices architecture in the web application point of view or Instagram point of view, yes, every microservice having its own server. 30 microservices, 30 Spring Boot web applications you created means all are having its own private integrated web servers. So whatever the port numbers you want, you can modify it. Whatever you want to do it, whatever you want to do it, whatever you want to do it, you can do it. Everywhere is having its own private server. So tomorrow you don't want one microservice and you want to stop that microservice. Yes, that means if you are stopping that microservice means only that server is going to stop. Your internally that server is going to stop automatically. Your microservice will come down, or your Spring Boot application will come down. That we will see that. I will show you step by step process. So the advantage over the Spring and Spring Boot web module point of view, the biggest advantage is integrated Tomcat server, integrated web server. You don't need to download anything, or you don't need any external Tomcat server or any web server to test your Spring Boot web application functionality. But if it is a Spring, again you need it. If it is a Spring Boot, you don't need it. That is the beauty of Spring Boot, and that is how Spring Boot is more Okay, rapid development providing comparing with Spring Boot point of view. When comparing with Spring Boot is reducing lot of time when comparing with the Spring Framework point of view. So that means when comparing with servlets, Spring is doing lot of benefit. People got lot of benefits from the Spring. And again, when comparing with Spring Boot point of view, okay, you are having lot of benefits. When comparing with Spring Boot is providing a lot of benefits. So this is how the Spring Boot got popular, and that's why people are using it nowadays everywhere. Spring Boot means you can call it as a. I mean, you're not depending on any external servers. Every application is coming up with the internal server, and you know that the difference between Spring and Spring Boot with respect to project creation also we discussed in the core module itself, right? So in the core module, when you want to create a Spring project, what you did steps. Maybe if it is a Maven configuration project, you created a simple Java project and you added Maven nature and you added what? Maven nature, and then you added dependencies on your own, and then you added your dependencies on your own. These are all steps you did manually, step by step point of view. But the moment if I introduce a Spring Boot, what you did, you are not done anything. You have some initializer, Spring Boot initializer point of view, and then just you clicked on create. That's all. Internally, what's happening? Internally, the above steps what you did manually is whatever you did here manually, like adding Maven nature, all these things, all taken care by the Spring Boot internally. But as a developer, we are not doing anything. We just went, filled, just clicking on that option, and internally it is going to take care. Internally, it is taking care of that. Right? So there itself, you understood the real benefit of Spring Boot, how much time you are reducing. Now, similarly, with respect to Spring Framework point of view, when you are creating the project for the first time, and you know that once you created Spring project and Spring Boot project, with respect to coding, both are common. With respect to coding, most of the times, coding wise, you are going to take same time. But for the first time when you are creating the project setup, then only you will have a lot of challenges for the first time. Similarly, with respect to Spring Framework and Spring Boot module point of view also, Spring Framework and Spring Boot module point of view also, yes, you will have some benefits, or maybe with respect to, I mean, web module point of view, I'm saying you no need to do lot of things what you did in the Spring Framework point of view. You no need to do anything in the Spring Boot. Just select the option, and automatically all web module functionalities related to that, it will got imported into your project. So that I will compare one finder and I will show you. But time being, we will directly jumping into the Spring Boot web application point only. Okay. So now what I'm going to do here it is, now I'll just show you how to create the Spring Boot web application, and then we will see anything else and all tomorrow, like that. Okay, now the point is how to create a Spring Boot web application. So this is all the story, guys. I think I explained you very well with respect to what is the challenges, servlets, Spring Framework, and Spring Boot point of view. The transition from servlets to Spring to Spring Boot point of view, I explained you. Why? Because tomorrow in interview they will ask you what is the advantage when comparing with Spring and Spring Boot. Then you can take one of this one also. Spring Framework, when you create a web application, you need an external server. So, but in Spring Boot, you don't need any external server. Automatically, when you create a Spring Boot application, it will come up with a integrated web server. So one of the feature like that. So we will see that. We will compare those things later also. So let's go to our STS. See, if you have time, try to. I already told you yesterday also. Why don't you try on the IntelliJ? So even I can take. I thought of taking examples now onwards IntelliJ. But the thing is, you will get only community edition in your case point of view. But it's okay. You can take that and you can install. You can do some experiments on that. New project. But this is somewhat licensed version. So Spring Boot point of view, see the moment I select same, Whatever you see there in the STS point of view, same thing here you can see. So you can give some your project name, what Java, Maven, and some package ID, all these things, and click on next. Then it will create a project like that. Okay. So what I will do is, if whenever you have a time, try to do in IntelliJ, but meanwhile you can practice in the STS itself. If you feel a little bit difficult in the IntelliJ and you are not seeing that plugin of Spring Boot, so you can't see directly in your community edition. Okay, the reason is that they're limited. They are selling this product on a high cost. If you are, it's very cost. I know that we can't afford it. For example, if you go here, but it's a good idea, guys. I'm telling you, in soft lot of product-based companies, nobody is using IntelliJ. Sorry, Eclipse. I mean, they are encouraging to use IntelliJ only. The reason is, it is improving lot of development techniques when comparing with Eclipse. Eclipse, when comparing with Eclipse, IntelliJ is going to be a powerful IDE. It will give you a lot of things automatically. It will make a lot of things automatically with respect to your development. So that's why a lot of software companies, people are using IntelliJ. But the thing is, if when you want to use individually, price is more. So if you see here, per year itself, $700. It's not 700 rupees, $700. So then 700 into 85 point of view, if you calculate it, it will come more cost. And that too only for a year. So as a learning point of view, it's very difficult. Okay, dealing with this, but software companies will give it to you when you join into any organizations. And some special categories, probably some students can get free it. So students means it's not like a regular student from a small college. I don't think they will accept, but you can try this option. They will ask your ID card, and that too you have to be. Right now you should be in a student position. That is then only you can access this. And like that, so if you want something like offers and all, maybe if you want to buy a product, you can do that, or else you have a edition called as community edition. So this is all they are talking about that. But if you want to use, at least you want to get a basic idea about that, you can use community edition. But my point is, at least you start doing something, at least small things on the intelligent. Ultimate, yeah, this is what community edition. So this is free. This is free, but only thing is, you know that, right? What is the difference between free and paid version point of view? Some small features will miss, but you can find out some plugins on the online, like Spring Boot plugin, all these things. Then you can add it and you can start doing that. Just do some experiments. Nothing will happen. If you feel still, do it as an experiment. That means practice. Meanwhile, you can do it on daily basis STS only. But whenever you have time and whenever you want to know IntelliJ, just start doing it parallelly. And once you got comfort on the intelligent and you feel like okay, you're able to do something Spring Boot, the things also on the IntelliJ, you can see that plugin, all these things. Then you can start using IntelliJ in your practice like that. Okay, so do that thing. For example, now let's come back and create the Spring Boot web application. Okay, it's a see the look and feel will change. There it is a different look and feel. Here it is a different look and feel. But ultimately, URL is same start.spring.io. Even from you can do from there also, right? Okay, so let me give you my first Spring Boot web app, web application, something like first application. So just project name. You know that, right? I'll do one thing. Okay, so Java, Maven, package name. You know what you have to give. You can give a good, meaningful package name. Yeah, whatever the project name you given, that will take as a artifact ID. Java 17 I have in our computer. Yeah, 17 jar file. Okay, that's all. Same thing. Whatever you will enter over the STS point of view, same thing here. Look and feel is same. That's all. Now click on next. Now here you will select Spring Boot version 3.4.1. Okay, so what you want to select in this case, today you are doing web application. So you are doing Spring web application. So web application, right? Web module. So that's why you have to choose this. See, the moment you are searching with web, you will get the web application. If you want, I can show you parallel in the STS also. Okay. Now what? Added, web is added. So web is for the purpose of only web functionalities, request and response point of view. If you want to database point of view, what we expected guys, we will use JPA. So add JPA. So that means web functionalities point of view, web module I taken. Even in the my web application point of view, I need database also because we will do everything from the database perspective. So JPA also I taken. And to work with JPA, you need a driver jar file which database you are using. For example, Oracle driver, right? So let's try same thing. Whatever you did until yesterday with respect to JPA, today you are adding some small called as web module. So new Spring Starter project and something like web app or whatever it is, project name you can give. Next, so here what you will select, same thing, JPA for database. I'm using Oracle, that's why Oracle driver, Lombok for Pojo classes, and yeah. So we need web today. So that's why we added web. So one thing what you added from yesterday to today is web. So that means now this project is going to contain two modules. It is supporting two modules. One is web module, second is JPA module. So that means you can do web functionalities as well as JPA functionalities also. That's all, finish it. So same thing here also. JPA and I need Oracle driver and I need Lombok. So you know what is the purpose of Lombok? So it's only to make sure setter getters are auto generated. And then JPA driver web Lombok. Yes, that's all. Create. I think it's somewhere else. New project Spring Boot. Okay, it is created somewhere in this, I think. No, it's there. Why it's not taking? Okay, I'll do that. Okay, so this is what, sorry. Yeah, touched this project. Yeah, open window. Okay, so that's all. Just so whatever you can see, same thing being seeing here also. Just option feeling a little bit difficult and intelligent, but don't stop your practice. That's what my intention. Parallelly, get focusing on the IntelliJ also when you have time, at least one or two examples, so that you can add in your resume and you can feel like that. So now where it is? Spring Boot. Yeah, I think this one. Yeah. So this is the one. So I think Gradle is selected by default based on yesterday. No problem. You can run on Gradle also. Nothing will happen. So now see here, same way it is created. Okay, so if you go and see the jar files, where you can see in the Maven point of view, external, yeah, Gradle, yeah, this way, external dependencies, right? So if you observe the jar files, what is being downloaded in the project is extra when comparing with the Spring Web module. See Spring Web MVC, Tomcat embedded server. That's what I said. Embedded Tomcat server, right? So internally it came up with automatically embedded Tomcat server, integrated, nothing but. And not only this, a lot of other jar files are added. You will not come back. You cannot come to a conclusion today itself. I'll explain you later what is this Jackson. So these are all came as part of the web module. When you added Spring Boot web module, this Jackson, especially this Jackson, is required to implement the REST services. If it is a Spring web application, then you will not get these jar files automatically. You have to add manually one by one into Spring web application. That comparison I will show you later. But see, automatically all these things came into your application like that. Okay. And you know that, okay, now this is how you will create. Now, whenever you added JPA module to your project, what is the first step you have to do, guys? You have to add the DB properties. That step mandatory. Okay, let me copy paste DB properties. Same database I am using. So this is a mandatory step. I'll explain it tomorrow also again. So that's all. This mandatorily you have to do that. Otherwise, what when you started your application, what you will get? You will get like your URL is missing. So that you will get it anyway. Once you add it, do like same run as Java web application. Don't do anything. You don't need to do any coding right now. Just observe the console. But adding DB is mandatory because you added JPA, right? That's why. If you are not added JPA, then no need to add that properties. Now observe your application got started successfully. And if you observe here, what is this? Tomcat started on the port number 8080. From where this Tomcat came? In my server, in my system, first of all, I don't have any Tomcat server. And if you want to see here also, generally what you will do, you will add servers to your browser, right? So if you see here servers, any servers, no server is there. But how from where it came? That's what. The Spring Boot web application internally came up with integrated Tomcat server. So finally our Spring Boot web application deployed on the Tomcat server only, on a web server only. But that web server is not you are done externally downloaded and installed. That came automatically as part of the project. So that means if I created again one more Spring Boot web application, it will come up with its own Tomcat server, its own integrated Tomcat server. So that means see how simplified the process is. Earlier, if it is a web application, what you have to do, you need to add a Tomcat server and then you will go like add to Tomcat server, run and deploy on the Tom. You have to do lot of steps. But today the process, the simplified like you are executing, it looks like you are executing a simple Java application only. You will go to the main Java class where Spring Boot application is available, run as Java application. It looks like you are executing a simple Java file, what you used to do in core Java. But actually, internally, what's happening? You are deploying your web application. You are deploying your web application of Spring Boot into a Tomcat server. The Tomcat setup, the deployment process, everything is internally taken care by the Spring Boot internally. So see how process. Now if you want to do same thing in the servlet point of view, you have to do a lot of steps. What? You have to create a web application project. Then you have to download the Tomcat server manually from the internet and you have to configure that server. You have to start your server first and then you will like run on server application, like that you will do the steps. But now you are not doing anything. Within 1 minute, your project setup is ready. That is the beauty of Spring Boot application. So that is what. And if I am showing same thing in the IntelliJ point of view, I think something it is having problem. I'll fix it later. Even in my office also we are using Eclipse only. So I thought let's start more. I uses now onwards in the training also. You just try on your own. So I will also try. I'll also try to do that. Okay. So anyway, we have at least for time being STS, which we are very much familiar. So you just use STS only and parallelly try with IntelliJ. Uh, so now you know the process, right? What you have to do when you want to create a web module is add, just add Spring Web Starter. That's all you have to do. Now it is called as starter. What is a starter also? You know that. I will show you that again one more time. Okay. So see here, if I created again one more project, new Spring Starter project, just do this step. That's all. By tomorrow, we will see a small example tomorrow how to write hello world example so that I can send request from the browser and I will receive back hello world from the server like that. We will see that kind of example tomorrow. Meanwhile, you just come up with a project creation point of view, how to do and all. You just take care of it. So you can give your project name whatever you want, Swiggy, Instagram, or whatever it is, and then Maven. You can give something project name, so something like Swiggy or whatever it is, and then yeah, so you can give this one also as com.swiggy or whatever it is, and then next add the modules. So what you have to add, web, search for web, then you will get Spring Web. Only web, Spring Web. If you observe here, only Spring Web. And you want to add DB functionalities, right? Whether you have to go with JDBC or JPA. So JPA, I want. So that's why JPA. And the moment you added JPA, you need to add a driver jar file. If you are using Oracle, Oracle. If you are using MySQL, MySQL. I'm using Oracle, so that's why Oracle driver. And this is the things you want mandatorily. Lombok is a for the purpose of you don't want to write setter getters automatically means that is Lombok. It's not mandatory. So like that, you can create your software application. Finish it. Now again, your application got ready. Now it start writing the programming. So let's start our application again. Go here, run as Java web application. Sorry, Java application. But you are not starting any server. You are not worrying about Tomcat server. That is the biggest challenge, right? When you started learning the Spring, sorry, especially servlets, you know how much struggle you to do the Tomcat setup. Now today you don't have anything that. Now what is this DB problem? Add that properties. This is always common properties, guys. DB properties. This will not change every time. I think I forgot to take YAML file. I'll cover one day, no problem. Not now. One fine day I'll take. Okay. So I added properties. Let me start once again. Run as Java application. Now see what happened. My server Tomcat started on the server 8080. You have to see this message. If it is a web application, then only you will see this. And if you see here, your application is not terminated. Until yesterday, your application is going to be terminated. When you started your Spring application, sorry, Spring Boot JP application, once the functionality is executed, immediately your application got terminated. But today it's not terminating. Why? It's a web application. Web application means your applications deployed on the Tomcat server. So that means your application is live. Your application is live. So that means now you can start sending requests to your server application. Now similar to server, tomorrow, I mean, when you are working with servlets, if you start Tomcat server, stops Tomcat server, what will happen? You can't send the request. So same point of view, now your Tomcat server is up and running internally. That's what the meaning of it is. It's not yet stopped. So if you are stopping means you are undeploying your project, nothing but you are stopping the Tomcat server. If you're stopping the Tomcat server means you can't send the request and responses, right? You can't receive the responses. Your application is down. So like that, you have to understand the point. Here it is. So again, if I can start it, run as Java application or run as Spring Boot application, whatever it is, both are same. Okay, so see here again, Tomcat server started on this context path and all. I'll tell you later what is context path. Started Swiggy web application. See here, started Swiggy application in so and so seconds. Like that, you got the message. So now it's time to write based on the requirement point of web application point of view. Tomorrow we will also implement one small sign in page, sign up page from the front end point of view and back end point of view. And then finally, we'll move to the REST APIs also. So what is the prerequisite, maybe before entering into more into coding of Spring Web Module or Spring Boot is, if you have time, maybe today you don't have anything to practice, right? So if you have a time, at least no need to practice, visit servlet tutorial once, or at least one small example. Can you practice on the servlets? That's all I'm expecting from you. So do one thing, make a small welcome message or whatever it is, a small example, please be practice on the servlets. Then tomorrow you can understand how much easy Spring Boot is when you know the servlet implementation and development point of view. So do that, and try to whatever the knowledge you gained in the servlet, just revise it once. That's all I'm expecting. I don't need to be expert. So just revise it, whatever you know, and whatever is mandatory, I'll feel like, and whatever is to be important, I'll discuss one more time in the Spring Boot point of view. But what is a request, what is a response, I can't do that. I can't explain again what is a request and response. So those details are common everywhere, irrespective of programming language, irrespective of frameworks. Okay, so just do those things, and tomorrow we will see. We will create our first Spring Boot. I mean, we created already, but we will see an example. We will implement an example tomorrow, and then we will send a request and we will receive the response. How to do that and all, what are the annotations involved. See, again, here you will see lot of annotations. Now, in this case, now tomorrow onwards, again, you are going to introduce with many new annotations. New annotations, because you know that the framework, entire framework is driving on the annotations only. So you already got lot of annotations in the core module, JPA module, JDBC module. And now you are going to see again few more annotations: controller, controller, request body, response entity, rest controller, so like that you will see lot of things, lot of other new annotations. Not as many, you will see couple of. And I will explain you MVC architecture also probably tomorrow. So I will explain first of all MVC architecture. Once I taken a small hello world example, I will explain you MVC architecture. So then you will realize why it is being called as MVC module also. And it's very important. So I'll explain you tomorrow what is an MVC architecture also. I like that we will see. And then we will see internal workflow of Spring or Spring Boot web module. How internally Spring Boot or Spring Framework internally dealing request and responses also I'll explain. For that, first of all, you have to complete one or two examples, hello world examples, request and response. Then we will see internally how Spring Framework is dealing with the request and responses point of view. We will see that. So we will see everything, details. I'm very much interested to teach web module mostly generally, and it's very important also. We will see every detail. Okay. So if you have any doubts, you can ask me. Otherwise, we can connect on tomorrow.